Folded today and Folded Community Diner,
Yep.
giant capital C in community. The chef and GM here now. And the diner is actually a nonprofit. We're owned by SOS Recovery Center community.
Okay.
And, there's the mission and the idea behind the restaurant. It's so much bigger than the restaurant itself. And not that there isn't anything already big enough with just trying to run a restaurant and keep that going.
Right.
But, I love the fact that, the mission here is to really be truly actively supportive.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, former chef owner at Gravy LLC and GM chef at Folded Community Diner, Chef Mark Segal. My man Mark, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I am always feeling unstoppable.
Dude, I'm psyched to be here. You're somebody who has been on my radar for as far back as I started this thing. And I think we first crossed paths with Chefs Collaborative in Boulder, Colorado.
That's exactly where. Yeah.
Back in the days when I was sleeping in my car, I've upgraded to a camper.
And in my corporate chef days.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Crazy. Where were you 10 years ago?
I was a corporate chef for Tinius Hospitality.
Okay. Wow.
So, popovers, galley hatch.
I know you spent some time there with them, but I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Wow. So where are you today, real quick, before we dive into the episode? Big picture, like what is Folded today?
Folded today and Folded Community Diner, giant capital C in community. The chef and GM here now. And the diner is actually a nonprofit. We're owned by SOS Recovery Center community.
Okay.
And, there's the mission and the idea behind the restaurant. It's so much bigger than the restaurant itself. And not that there isn't anything already big enough with just trying to run a restaurant and keep that going.
Right.
But, I love the fact that, the mission here is to really be truly actively supportive.
And when did you guys get started here?
Back in November. Yep. So just had our year anniversary here.
Congratulations.
At the diner. Yeah,
that's
thanks.
awesome.
First milestone, check.
Yeah. And it was actually Caitlin from Red's Good Vibes, another 501c3, who said I need to talk to you folks over here. She recommended both you and John Burns to be guests on the show. And I said, I need to sit down and just get Mark on the show because I know he has a long 30-year career on the Seacoast and we need to pay homage to you. So that's what we're going to do. And then John Burns, was that John by any chance? Somebody just walked by. Maybe not.
I didn't look. That's why we locked the doors.
John Burns is coming back and we are going to sit down and focus on what you're doing here at Folded Community Diner. But I just want to pay homage to you and the work you've done on the Seacoast, man.
Thanks, man.
So
happy to have been a part of this community for this long.
Yeah, man. And everybody I know has always said amazing things about you. People on the Seacoast, other chefs. So I know this is going to be good. So before we dive into who you are, how you got to where you are today, and how you've transformed as a professional, let's get that motivational, inspirational, ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
And mine is really simply never stop learning. And whether that just be, professionally, constantly developing your own skill, your own knowledge about a particular cuisine, but also learning about yourself, learning about the people around you, learning how to be a better communicator, how to be a better motivator in the right way. I came up in the old school brand where motivation was somebody stressing you out in your ear, screaming at you while your hands are already shaking. You're so nervous trying to get it right. And
that's really one of the big things I want to talk about today is your personal evolution as a chef. Somebody who's been in this industry for over 30 years now, who went to the CIA, who has worked on the West Coast, the East Coast, and from your perspective, the evolution of the industry and where we were and where we're like, hopefully through your story, we're able to capture that. So I'm stoked to get into it, man.
Sure.
Great way to get this thing started. So where does it make sense to start sharing your story? Take us back.
For me, my career in hospitality can't be separated from my childhood growing up. My dad had a live performance theater, 3,200 seats. So hospitality in that regard and showmanship, which is also a big part of the restaurant business for sure, was always a big part of my life as a kid. Food was a giant part of our culture. We actually, back in the early days of the theater, the artist would play for a week.
Wow.
So Monday night was Welcome to Wallingford, Connecticut night for whoever the artist was. So after the performance, my father would throw a giant party at our house, 60, 80 people starting at 10, 11 o'clock at night. But I would have gotten home from school and there was an Episcopalian minister, Father Mark. I wish I could remember his last name, but he would cater all of this himself. So he'd have pasta laying out all over the living room, drying, when I say cater, like doing it right. And I remember just being mesmerized by him as a kid, not only the quality of the food, but that one person could do that. That was almost magic to me.
What have you learned about the magic today? Is it magic, or how does that magic happen?
Well, I think,
looking at that through the lens of your experience now where you're creating this magic, how would he have done that?
Well, and it certainly you learn tools over time as far as execution and how to be more efficient, but
having a network of people that you can lean on to bring it all together.
Yeah. Part of the magic is, still not being sure if you can pull something off and then diving in with both feet and getting it done, and then that feeling of satisfaction, part of the magic goes back to that, never stop learning because, 30 years into this, I feel like there's, as much as I've been able to learn, there's still so much more I don't know than I do.
What are the biggest lessons about hospitality that you picked up, subconsciously at this time that still make an impression on you today?
Humility, I think.
Give me, how did was it this individual? What was his name again? Father or?
Oh no, I thought you were talking later on. He was always certainly a very gracious, humble individual.
Okay. So I'm talking about from that experience as a kid. Seeing this hospitality being delivered to the new artist every week, what did you learn? Like, what were some the low riding initial lessons on hospitality that you picked up during this time of your life?
Oh, sure. And again, as part of the theater, it was that, everyone is your guest, you are the host. So being that facilitator, trying to think about other people's needs,
how did that manifest?
even back then. For me, I turned into the teenager that while everybody else was, throwing parties at 16 years old. Yeah, I was doing that too. But, it was lobster fra diavolo for the first 40 people in the door and Mongolian chicken and,
oh, man.
Sure, there was Doritos and stuff like that too. But,
so when
I'd throw down for my friends.
Did you know at this
teenager
time? Did you know at this time that you wanted to be a chef?
I always had the inkling,
okay.
But I always really loved it. And I had a reticence for a long time about turning what I loved into a career.
Okay.
That it would turn into a job and become mundane, and I'd lose that love.
So
and
what
lose
changed
that
when you
passion.
decided? Like, when did you choose to get away from that mindset of leaning into your passion, not being afraid of it?
Actually had the opportunity through the theater because we had a restaurant on the grounds, a 250-seat restaurant that needed a manager. And, just stepped in, when your father owns the business, you get, you certainly get the opportunity to take some chances. So
this was in the 70s?
Yeah. So for me, this would have been for me now 86.
86?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's when you first really start cutting your teeth into like working, having a position in a restaurant that you're going to work every day.
Yeah. And it was boot camp for sure.
How long did that last? 86 to
86 to 92.
92.
Yeah.
So 6-year run.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that period, like where were you? 92, what was going through your mind? What was your vision for yourself?
By then, I'd already been doing it professionally and still loved it.
Okay.
But the more I got into it, it was that, wow, there's so much I don't know.
Right. What was the it that you were doing? Managing?
Yeah, and cooking. So, yeah, and the whole idea was a 250-seat restaurant on the grounds of a 3,200-seat theater. So we were only open for shows. So everything was pre-theater. So that classic pre-theater, everybody sits at once.
Cool.
Everybody's got to be out the door
so you're
because
doing
the
like,
show starts at 8.
Like wedding style, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, finding your way to, to simple items you can execute well.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah, exactly.
What was the actual it though? So you said you were cooking and managing, but what was it that you fell in love with? What was what drew you to it? Like what made you want to do this more and more again?
Combination of the smiles on people's faces out in the dining room when they were having a good time, but the sense of accomplishment from the entire team. because, it was pretty grueling to
Yeah.
have to do, okay, we did, and especially if there's 2 shows a night, okay, let's do 250 all at once.
Yeah.
Gather yourself. Okay, let's do this again.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful what you just said, being seen. So I think, oh man, his name's escaping me. The author of Unreasonable Hospitality, Will Guerrero. I always say his name weird, I think. Guerrero, am I saying it right?
Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Well, anyway, he recently posted something that resonated with me. He said hospitality is seeing someone, and I think it's the reciprocation of noticing that you're being seen. So like if it's a two-way street, if you see somebody, they're going to turn around and see and recognize you for seeing them.
Absolutely.
In that moment. And I think it's that, I don't think we realize how important that is for humans.
Hugely important. That's why, we all have our little steps of service, right, that we all go through. But, that greeting at the door, that initial 5 to 10 seconds from the time that someone's walked into your door, to me is absolutely critical,
Right.
that they're greeted in some way.
Yeah. And I think it's weird because so many people in this industry are addicts of dopamine, right? And we try to get it in different forms. But I think the thing that true hospitalitarians love is that hit of dopamine when they get recognized and seen for their hard work.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me now it's team. I mean, early on in my career, I was looking forward to being seen for my own hard work. I enjoyed seeing my name on the bottom of a menu. It definitely, it's a source of pride for any
Right.
chef coming
Right.
up. By now at this stage of my career though, I don't want to see my name. I want to see other people's names.
Well, I want to get into that, but before we dive into where you are today along this evolution, so in 1992, you were saying to yourself, I want to see beyond the family business. What was going through your mind? What was the strategy? What was your vision for yourself?
The timing was actually perfect because the theater business was changing a lot at the time. So we were being bought out by a much larger theater organization. So I had the option of either staying on with them, and they were already contracted up with Boston Concessions, which is a great outfit. They're still doing quite well.
And this was in Connecticut.
But yeah, and so it could have led to, running the food and beverage at Fenway Park or something like that. But for me, it was that time to be able to break away and explore that part of me that said, I know there's a lot more that I need to know that I don't know.
What was your dream at this time?
For me at this time, it was definitely eventually to own my own restaurant, as I think any up and coming chef when they first start out, that's absolutely your goal.
So was it your goal at this point to go get the experience you needed to go open your own restaurant? Was that what you were thinking?
Ultimately, yeah. But I wanted to be able to do it in the right way. I didn't want to just be able to open one because, I can get the backing together and sure, I can cook a little bit. But,
so you said you learned. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just, I knew I really needed to know a lot more because ultimately it's a hard enough business and I didn't want to fail.
You said you learned a lot, but what was it that you felt like you didn't know yet that you needed more? Like where were your insecurities at this time?
Everything was very finite for me, so I was already used to being able to deal with volume, being able to hit a food cost, but only in a rudimentary way with the very limited scope of the menu we were doing because of the volume, the speed that we had to get everybody out with.
Yeah.
So
you needed to get new tricks up your sleeve.
And I loved great food.
Yeah.
I was always exposed to really good food. My father at one point wanted to, set me up with a stage at the great French restaurant Lutèce in New York City back in the day.
Wow. So did your dad, was he well connected? Was he the kind of guy that could get you these opportunities?
Yeah, through the theater business, sure. Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Right.
So
you get, a lot of influential people come through those doors and you spend all this time giving hospitality, that giving comes around.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, a super fortunate childhood, and grew up around the likes of people like, Jerry Vale and Enzo Stuardi and Engelbert Humperdinck and Tom Jones and this one and that one, but it also taught me a great lesson early on that, they're big celebrities, they're big stars, but people are people, and some of them were certainly nicer than others, so, and, you get to see that, and recognize that at any level in life. People are
cool
people,
lesson.
and it's about how you treat people.
I love that. So what was the strategy for you? What did you say you had to go do to get to where you could go open your own restaurants?
So it was either go on and pursue those opportunities like a stage at a high-end restaurant, start there, bypass culinary school. But for me, I wanted to go to culinary school, and there was no better in my eyes than Culinary Institute in New York.
Okay.
So went to CIA, went through their associates program there. Was fortunate enough to actually do my internship at Biba Restaurant in Boston. So and that was under Lydia Shire and Susan Regis. So tremendous opportunity there.
So 2 years at the CIA?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you, knowing what you know now, if you were born 40 years later, 60 years later, would you do the same thing that you did? Do you think that's the same path that anybody should take, culinary school, or would you go a different order?
I think everybody's got to find their own order, and the business is chock full of people that have not gone the culinary school route and have done really well for it. I'm glad I went to it a little bit later rather than going there at, let's say, 19 or 20 years old.
How old were you?
I was 28 at the time, so and by then, again, helping to run the family business, already having a little bit of insight into how restaurants are run. So I went at it as I'm here on a mission. I'm going to soak this up for everything I can in the 2 years I was there. And I did. Every time there was a guest chef and they were looking for assistance, yes, please. But it also led to cool stuff. Like I got to help cook Thanksgiving dinner for Julia Child with the president of CIA, Ferdinand Metz. So.
That's cool. I mean, that's definitely a pattern I picked up on when people do go to culinary school. The people that wait until like their mid-20s or later to go to culinary school always almost get a better ROI on their time. They already know they love it. They already have the experience. They're there to get like the most out of that 2 years possible. When you're 18 years old, you're just looking to have a good time.
Yeah.
Like you were too distracted by other things,
Yeah. And I still had a great time there, but I think because I was older, I knew exactly why I was there. And having the maturity enough to not be afraid to raise your hand,
right?
And put yourself in situations.
I think the best value in culinary school is the network you're purchasing when you go to those schools. If you want, you can go anywhere in the country if you can make an impression on a instructor.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you're busting your ass and you're showing up and you're doing all the extra work, you're going to make those impressions.
No, there's no doubt. I was going through a bunch of old stuff. My wife and I were getting ready for a yard sale and, old menus, this and that. And, I came across my recommendation for my internship at Biba from Chef Pierre Leblanc. Turns out they hadn't accepted interns there in 2 years.
So I did a little bit of research. I'm just going to, because you have 30 years from this point on, really, like, because you're in your 60s, how old are you?
Almost 59.
59?
Yep, 60 this year.
59, 60. So we're looking at like 30 years of experience we got to cover, right?
Yeah.
So I want to just kind of go through the list and tell me if you think that there's anything that we should add to this list. So from BB's, Lydia Shire, you're with Susan Regis.
She was there as well. So Susan was chef de cuisine, Lydia's head chef.
Got it. And then Mark Peel.
Campanile restaurant. So that's Campanile and La Brea Bakery.
Okay.
A lot more people, at least nationwide, are familiar with La Brea more than they are.
And then Nancy Silverton.
Yeah.
Very familiar name there. And then you were with, how do you say Joachim?
Joachim Splichal. Oh, yes.
I totally screwed that one up.
Yeah, Austrian.
How long were you with him?
Almost 2 years. Yeah.
And then Octavio Baccarat?
Becerra, yeah, and Octavio was the corporate chef for Patina Group. So this was all
Becerra. My last name's Cacciatore. My ancestors roll in their graves. It's bad.
When I moved out to LA, it was like I was pronouncing Sepulveda Boulevard as Sepulveda. Octavio, watching people cringe.
Becerra, and then from there, Suzanne Goen.
Yeah, and again, all experiences through La Brea and Campanile.
Okay.
So got the job out there early on. That was my first gig in LA. I thought I was going to work at Joe Miller's, actually at Joe's in Venice.
And then you find yourself in Portsmouth around first with Pesce Bleu.
Yeah.
And what year was that?
So that was 2002.
2002. So from 1994 to 2002, you have this experience. So about an 8-year window.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So a couple of years in culinary school and then 6 years out in California.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now that we kind of zoomed over at 30,000 feet, that early stage of your career, reflecting back at this time, what was your evolution like from this time of graduating culinary school to getting to Portsmouth, New Hampshire?
I stayed just as eager as I did when I was in culinary school, so I definitely kept raising my hand. Okay. Tried to get into the best kitchens I could find when I got to Los Angeles. Applied to La Brea Bakery, Campanile, a restaurant called Drago. It's a chef named Celestino Drago out there. And like I said, I thought I was getting a job. He was a tough cookie, for sure. I wouldn't want to mess with him. But that's a whole nother story. His brother was his chef and wanted me to come in and sort of politely, without him having to do it, move his brother out of the way. Oh, that was a little like, I don't know. No, thanks.
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So you're here, you're raising your hand, you're learning. Was there one of these places or two? If you had to narrow out 3 of these spots, where did you grow the most as a chef?
Early on, definitely at Campanile, because I got the opportunity to go to the farmers markets with Nancy Silverton and this other gray-haired gentleman who'd always ride in the cab of the pickup truck down there, and I'd wind up in the back of the bed
with all the
there was no
sure
room,
nothing's rolling out,
and just rolling down I-10 on our way down. But turns out that gentleman was Paul Schrade. Who was heavily involved in the growers movement out in California. And if you think any of the chefs were well respected walking through the farmer's market, he was royalty. Okay. And I noticed that right away. I'm like, whoa, okay, who is this gentleman?
Yeah.
And found out more about him and his family's involvement.
So how did you grow? Was it just your exposure to the food and the mindset of fresh food? What was that?
First of all, the mindset of fresh food. Yeah. And then that was further heightened actually at Le Doux Cafe. We were a very French restaurant, actually getting shipments once a month from France. So cask butter, unpasteurized cheeses, all the fun stuff. We had a tremendous garden right in between we actually were divided with 2 spaces. So we had a beautiful garden out there with Persian mulberries and fresh bay laurel and 4 different kinds of thyme, on and on and on. But we'd also, our chickens and ducks would be delivered the next day from the farmer, head on, feet on. I knew when I went for the interview there, walked in the kitchen, it was all heavy-duty Mauvier French copper pots, the ones that weigh 10 pounds empty. And this guy was actually larding a leg of lamb, old school, I can be happy. Man. I want to work here.
Where were these restaurants? I think nobody can argue that these restaurants, being led by people like Nancy Silverton, were at the leading edge of farm to table and bringing back tradition around food and paying homage to food and really respecting the ingredients. Where were they with their cost of goods and inventory, and how hard is it to do old world food with new world systems?
And none of that I was ever privy to. Biba was certainly part of that same movement. Right. Walk in the kitchen and open the walk-in and there's a whole goat hanging there. Okay, what are we doing with this today? But I was just a cook.
Right.
So the whole idea was just don't mess it up. That's expensive.
Right.
Hey,
don't waste
that uni dish. Use all the uni. That
so
kind of deal. So
it's more about really using the most and respecting the ingredients and not wasting any of the ingredients, and that's how they're controlling their costs.
Yeah, from at that point, that was all I could see.
Right.
Right. I knew there was plenty more out there from having seen it already,
Yeah.
with the restaurants at the theater. But,
From the prime cuts to the bones.
Yeah. So, just being a part of that process, though, and that efficiency and how to be that efficient.
Right.
How to
The
go,
technique.
how to use everything.
Yeah.
All right. Extremely valuable later on down the road. And when it was my turn to control food costs.
So most of your growth was basically around the values associated with food and then how to get the most out of the food.
Yeah. And that was, the first 3 of the 6 years there.
Okay.
And then became the sous chef at Pinot Bistro out in the valley, which is owned by Patina Group. So Joachim Splichal, Octavio, all those guys.
Okay. So
and they're, a very, very tight organization. They eventually wound up getting bought out by, I can't think of the Restaurant Associates out of New York. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
So Yoshim, am I saying that correctly? Mm-hmm. And Octavio were business partners.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is your first time being labeled a sous chef.
Yeah. Well, I was already
that
sous
title.
chef de cuisine at Les Deux.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah.
What was different about this experience? Would you say you grew more here?
Yeah. There was much more accountability.
Okay.
And much more feedback in the numbers. You were directly a part of it. They shared the spreadsheets with you. You got to sit down with their GM and discuss those spreadsheets. What looked good, what didn't look good, why, what we could possibly do about it.
So this is the first time you're really diving more into the numbers of things. So tracking, and this is what year is
and
this?
in a much more complicated way. I get, doing it with the theater kind of didn't count compared to this.
So were they still doing the same level of food that you were used to with the Nancy Silverton and that group of people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, not quite as precious. Le Deux was a special time. You know, I mean, if I had to look back at the restaurants that, where, I got to enjoy my cooking absolutely the most, it was probably Le Deux. We wrote the menu every single day, literally on a piece of paper, because we were getting fresh things in every day. Yeah,
sure.
You don't get to do that very often. So,
Right.
And I recognized that by then for, how special that was.
But I think as special as that is, and as much as my concern looking into the future, it's like the more challenging it gets to control costs, to compete with bigger organizations, to keep your prices as low as possible. So we can how do you find that balance between having the respect for the ingredients and having respect for tradition and really delivering a food experience, while also controlling your costs of labor, to have people like yourself who are talented, who can come in and actually execute on those menus? Like they're not cheap. You got to pay them what they're worth, right?
Oh, yeah.
And have a whole kitchen full of those people, and then to have the cost of those goods, those ingredients that you're using. Like, how do you find that balance? And it sounds like where you went next with Yoshim. Mm-hmm. I'm always afraid I'm saying that name incorrectly. And Octavio, they kind of gave you some of that piece of the equation.
Yeah, much more so. Yeah.
So get into what that looked like. Do you think that they were doing it at like the top of the at this time? Like, were they like the best at that? Like, what did that look like?
Again, it looked like a lot of information sharing, a lot of spreadsheet sharing. Along with that, also a lot of accountability.
Meetings?
All of the above. Monthly, yeah. So
what did those meetings look like? Can you remember? I know we're going back 20 years.
Oh, sure. There were very few. Most of them were phone meetings, because everybody was spread out. They promoted a good degree of competition amongst the different restaurants in the group.
What did that look like?
We're all a little bit competitive, I think, at that level.
Was it like friendly competition?
Yeah,
like
very much so. It wasn't, nobody was cutting anybody's knees off, but,
what were the benchmarks you were comparing yourself? Like, how are you keeping score?
With the other restaurants in your unit or in your group. So because there was Pinot Bistro, Pinot Hollywood, Pinot Brasserie in Las Vegas, the San Francisco Opera House, Nick and Steph's Steakhouse down the road. There were, this was a multi-unit organization. They had 2 properties in Disney. So, there were a lot of different, most of it the same style and at the same level.
Right.
So we kind of were on par with one another.
That's cool.
And
in different
you know,
markets too, which is interesting
Yeah.
because you'd assume that some markets would be clear front runners.
Well, and certainly nobody was keeping up with the Disney properties
Right.
in any way, shape,
People
or
are
form.
looking to burn money in Disney.
Yeah, no, that that just wasn't happening.
So, like, what were the benchmarks in terms of like the numbers you were like, if like you were playing the game of business and you were in competition with each other to make each other better? Whereas like prime costs, like labor costs?
Yeah, so
Total gross.
we were bonused on 3 different levels as kitchen managers, sous chefs, chefs, and it was your food cost, your labor cost, and then also your basic controllables.
Okay, so
You know,
cost of
and,
goods.
Yeah, and keep but then also all your little tiny small wares, your cleaning supplies, your this, your that. Just making sure that we were tight on all the aspects that were within our control. We didn't run the marketing department, so
Right.
we didn't have access to that.
You were
budget
focused
or,
on
yeah.
bottom line
Yeah.
controls,
and,
not top line
yeah,
controls.
and efficiency.
Yeah. So when you do, and I think at the time, were they calling it open book management? Was that a word that was being used?
It didn't get thrown around the company, but
Okay.
I would definitely call it that. Absolutely.
And gamification.
Yeah.
Because you're giving each other targets and you're playing the game. You're bringing your team in on the game and you're saying these are our targets. Here's where we are. Here's how we stack up against the competition. Here are our goals for like the month. Let's get our our cost of goods down a point. Let's see if we can shave whatever, like $1,000 off of our waste or whatever.
All those
like
things.
all these things. What happens when you start sharing this? So they would trickle that information down to you, and then you would turn around and trickle it to your team, I'm assuming.
Not everybody in the team.
Okay.
No. So generally that information was only really between the chef and then the 2-3 sous chefs.
Okay.
It had multiple sous depending upon the.
Got it. So what would,
the
what would that
organization, so.
conversation look like between the 3 of you to see how you could make those tweaks?
And that was a back office meeting, and we'd sit down there, chef would conduct it. But we had different chefs, at different organizations. I was originally with Pinot Bistro, and then wound up going over to Pinot Hollywood, one of their other ones. So,
Got it.
Different chefs.
This was the late 90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Slightly different management style.
It's interesting for me because I hear so many different stories from different people.
And by now, early 2000s.
Early 2000s?
Yeah, because
Okay.
that was my last gig in LA was Pinot Hollywood, and then came out back east to Peche Blue.
I mean, I love hearing the perspective of people working for these groups at this time and earlier times and seeing the evolution of the industry. And I think what's cool today, you see a lot of people doing what you were talking about, but they take that open book management and they bring it right down to the dishwasher.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that, but think about it though. If you're trying to manage your wares, like who's going to be the executive of wares?
You know it.
The dishwasher.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to shave points, sharing those numbers and sharing these goals with everybody on your team, but then you're getting perspective from all these different people who are seeing parts of the business that you don't see on a daily basis, and they can make suggestions.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where we are today.
Preach it.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't agree more.
So it's cool to see that, this stuff started like in like the 80s and 90s and into the 20s. The people doing it the best only really brought that information down to the top 3 people at every organization. But what happens when you keep letting that trickle down?
Well, and I think as we became, that next generation of manager, we saw the value in that. And we became those individuals that did start to share it with our entire team.
Yeah.
Realizing what a wonderful tool it is, not just for their own understanding, but for their empowerment and their investment in what you're doing.
Any other big lessons, experiences that you garnered before coming to the seacoast of New Hampshire?
Well, I mean, again, going back to the humility thing, I waited a while to take on my first execs chef gig. I didn't pursue anything when I was out in LA, and probably could have, given the positions I was already holding at the time. But for me, I also, it was a time in my life, my dad's health wasn't getting any better. I didn't want to be, an entire country away from him.
Right.
And as it turned out, timing was pretty good because I moved out March of 2002 and he passed away December the same year. So
wow.
glad I was able to, to be around and be here. But
That's
yeah,
nice.
I thought I was going to wind up in Boston somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Connecticut, that would be like your city, right? Or New York. 'cause
And
you're
New
kind of right
York
in the
more
middle.
for me because
Yeah.
I grew up in New Haven, so
Okay.
southern Connecticut. So
Got it.
yeah, that Hartford is where you start to see more of the Boston
Right.
pull.
So why Boston for you?
Well, I knew I wanted to continue to do the kind of food that I was doing in Los Angeles, or
Okay.
at that level,
Got
let's
it.
say, right? I loved Portsmouth. I used to come up to it all the time as a young man, but I didn't think there'd be necessarily all that many opportunities for me to make Portsmouth the first stop.
So this
as
is in
it
the
were.
80s?
So this would have been now coming out in 2002.
Yeah, but as a young man.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so growing up, kind of a second family
Got
to
it.
me, as it were. Their father had grown up in York Beach.
Okay.
So they'd come up to York Beach. But as young people, York Beach is fun. But if we're really going out, we're going to Portsmouth.
Yeah, Portsmouth was a sailor's town back in those
Oh,
days.
So, and I just loved it. And it still had a vibrant restaurant scene
Yeah.
back then. And especially I had the pleasure of actually being able to dine at Blue Strawberry.
Oh, cool.
And being able to experience, Chef Howler's food and the entire experience that eating at Blue Strawberry was. It was just special. And that kind of told me in the back, like, no, you can do this in Portsmouth. It will be received. I was, a little reticent.
Well, today, sorry, go ahead. You're a little I cut you short.
Oh, just saying it. I was a little reticent that I'd be able to really do the same kind of food that I was doing out in Los Angeles.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like that you're it seems like you're constantly finding the fringe, the edge, right? So like you're in Los Angeles where like this new food is just emerging, right, on the West Coast, and then I don't know where were you when you were with the next stop where we're talking about the numbers and all that.
Oh, so that was with Patina Group. So I would have been Pinot Bistro and Pinot Hollywood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of you take this experience, you bring it to the East Coast where it's starting to build momentum. Then I think by like 2007 is when, like, with the advent of the smartphone, where people all across the country, this is like the new normal, like farm to table is like really taking off. And then you're afraid to bring that to Portsmouth, but now you're up in like Somersworth, right? Where like even kind of further away, you're taking that level of food to like. And I think that's just like a testament that no matter where you are in the country now, if you're doing that high level of food, there's like somebody there that's going to receive it.
Oh, sure. And I don't want to compare, what we're doing here at the diner right now to, what we were doing, let's say at Peche Blue, back then. But
what would this diner's equivalent have been in 2000? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
In terms,
Oh, sure.
So like even like I think what you're seeing at like the diner level has been elevated across the boards in terms of quality. Would you disagree with that?
I think quality all around the United States has gone up. I think I think there's a different level of chef, and the next generation is broader than my generation.
I think the consumer palate is also broader.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
they've been
expectation-
introduced to more
Right.
flavors, more techniques, and I survived fusion food, as it were, as they like to refer, the shrimp ice cream taco and a flaming bourbon wasabi. People were cooking, they were cooking with ingredients they'd never worked with before, which is great, but they were also cooking without an understanding of the cultural significance of why that food is eaten in a particular culture, where it's eaten. To me, food has always told a story.
Right.
And it does tell the story of a people, and
Right.
being respectful and telling the right story to me has always been super important. So,
Yeah. I appreciate that.
to me, it's about the honesty, I guess, in the food more than anything else.
Okay.
Like integrity, whatever you want to call it. When you're doing farm to table, don't greenwash, do it. If you're not, don't say you are.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But be good at what you do and what you are.
Yeah. And I think, 100%. I think that's one of the reasons why I push back on marketing a lot, because if you're good at telling people what you do and selling what you do, and you're not really good at doing the thing you say you're good at, but you're good at convincing people you are, you can be just as successful, if not more successful, than people who are shutting their mouths and doing the fucking work.
Hey,
Pardon
my
language.
closed restaurant is probably a testament to that. 4,500 followers and 4.8 stars. And,
Yeah, we'll get there.
So.
I want to share that. So, but when you came to the East Coast, your father passed. Were you already up in Portsmouth, or were you?
Yeah, I was able to come right to Portsmouth. As it turned out, there was another Joachim. We'll get you used to that name by the time this is over. Joachim.
Names are my weakness, man. Keep going.
Another Austrian Joachim named Joachim Sandbickler. But as it turned out, he had just relocated from LA as well and was opening a restaurant in Portsmouth called Péché Bleu.
Okay.
And was looking for a chef. So I had seen it on a nationwide job search, threw the application in. He and I chatted for quite a number of times, which led to my, being flown up to Portsmouth and doing a tryout with him and getting offered the position there. Yeah.
So how long were you at Péché Bleu?
Little 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yeah.
And this was in 2004?
2002 to 2004 and change. Yeah.
Got it. This first time as an executive chef.
First time as an exec. Yeah.
What's the struggles like for you during this time? Having that new role, having that new title. Was there new things in your world that you weren't used to?
Absolutely, being that individual that is now making all those decisions, and certainly consulting my team, about stuff. But, now it was that sense of, everything does stop with me.
What were the new decisions you were responsible for making?
All the menu writing, everything that went on it, I was used to contributing in a solid way, but never made those final decisions, all the purchasing decisions, all the staffing decisions. Yeah.
What were the biggest struggles for you relative to those different verticals?
For me, I'd say probably the staffing more than anything else, and lack of delegating. Being my first exec's job, and of course, having a couple of decades now, with that behind me, but I just took on way too much. I had tremendous talent in that kitchen. And people that went on to great leadership roles in the industry, but I had to be the one,
Right. So would you say taking too much on, like bearing it all on your shoulders?
Oh yeah,
Not
absolutely.
delegating.
Nope, not at all.
What was the tipping
not
point
nearly
for you
enough
in your career? When did that change for you?
Probably I'd say, halfway through my tenure at the 100 Club.
Okay, so we'll book.
It took a while. It took a while for me to get to what I would consider to be starting to get there. Yeah.
So what were you? So you said, the creative part too was a challenge for you. Now having to do all the purchasing and creating the entire menu, or was that more what you were good
The
at?
creation wasn't so much. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and I was pretty comfortable with it. It was still definitely a challenge. But
You mentioned ego earlier.
oh sure.
Where was your ego at this point? Were you still trying to?
I'd say an
feed
8,
that?
9 out of 10 scale. Yeah.
So meaning
Big time.
too big of an ego?
Oh, huge.
So
yeah.
the higher the number, the bigger the ego?
Yeah.
Was your ego ever a 10?
I'd say probably others would say a 12. Yeah.
Where was this?
maybe higher, right? Really at Péché.
Okay.
And it's easy to look back, but I think most of that came from insecurity.
Okay.
I was that screaming, intimidating chef that, I had been trained by.
What were
As
you
it turned
insecure
out,
about?
I was a product of failing, of blowing it,
Were you close?
to failing.
Yeah.
Probably closer than I'd realized at the
Yeah.
time. Sure, because I'd stressed myself out and pushed myself to the point where I wasn't making good decisions.
Like what?
Wasn't leading my team in the right way. Well, again, being that screaming chef. What are you doing this for? Like,
What would happen when you would do that?
Well, like mostly what happens when you do that to anybody, they'd freeze up even more.
Yeah.
Generally, it wouldn't help their performance.
Make them hate you.
And now I'm getting on their case because now they're just not tough enough mentally.
Right.
Because I went through this. What? I hated every second of it too. But hey, man, no, this is how you get to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get to the other side, right? I didn't see that there were other paths to the other side. I had no idea. Looking back, it was like a horse with blinders on.
Yeah, and I think, how old are you at this time? in your life?
By then, old enough to kind of know better. So mid-30s.
Mid-30s? Yeah. But I think this is also, I think we have to The cool thing about the world we live in today, I think we are learning so much about the human mind, and we're making breakthroughs in science. We have to remember that we are a science. Our brain is a science, and we're learning so much. Like, how many 30-year-old males would you have known in 1990 or in 2000 that knew what emotional intelligence was?
Lucky for me enough that, again, I
Really?
go back to
Like,
say
those were
old enough
words
to
that
know
were
better.
floating
Yeah.
around? Wow.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a very close emotional family, and the men in my family, we still kiss each other on the lips when we see each other.
Well, you're
We're not
fortunate.
We're not shy about sharing emotion. What? We love each
I
other.
love that.
Yeah.
I try to use that word more and more often every day myself. But I think, I guess the point I'm trying to make is, it was easier then. We lived in a culture where we weren't really empowering each other with this knowledge of emotional intelligence,
Right.
and leading with love.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I think, we beat ourselves up as an industry, but I think that, that was also the world we were in. Like, I think society has come a long way.
I agree 100%. It definitely has. And I
Yeah.
like the direction that it's
For
taken.
sure.
To me, it's so much healthier. I think it's going to, we haven't probably even seen, because this is relatively new,
Right.
And you think, what, the better part of 5 years now, where it's a normal part of kitchen conversation.
I think it's only picking up momentum.
Yeah.
As we
hope,
learn
yeah.
more about, they say science, like, technology is exponentially improving, right? Moore's law. But I think that also applies in what we're learning about the human mind. We're learning exponentially more about how we function ideally. And the more we learn, the more we share that. I think that we're just going to move in a better direction even faster. That's my hope. That's my mission with this podcast.
100%. I mean, you think about the number of people, 2 and 3 decades ago that probably could have been incredibly talented, but were driven away early on because it was such a toxic environment. They, as much as, okay, this seems attractive. Well, no, this part's so grotesque. I don't want any part of it.
Right.
What could that have done with that generation of individuals empowered in the right way?
Right. So at Pesce Blue, you're really starting to realize that, for you, it's more about ego, my reputation. You're taking on a lot more responsibility. You weren't delegating. You were quick to anger. You were quick to put people down. What was the next point of evolution for you? It sounds like you said at the 100 Club, which you joined in 2004.
Yeah. Yep.
You started to realize you could be better at delegating. That's one thing. Before we get into that, like, what was going on? Like, how did you find this opportunity at the 100 Club?
I had left Pesce Blue, and just one of these deals, like after 2.5 years, I thought we were doing really well. The owner had mentioned that, and I had told him early on, like, I'm not going to hit you up for a raise, any of that stuff in the first 2 years. Let's just get this thing up and running.
Right.
Let's get healthy. We'll talk about it then.
Got it.
We were up and running. We were healthy. It started with time for my review, but don't worry, it won't be attached to a raise. And by the time we got done, did a classic corporate review. I think I came in at an average of 1.6 out of 5 in all categories.
Wow.
So I decided to fire myself.
Okay.
Essentially, it's like, well, obviously, if I'm not performing to that level, it was silly. And again, that was my ego talking. I could have handled. I was looking forward to the feedback.
Yeah.
I'm not shy about critical feedback. That seemed a little excessive, especially for a restaurant that was doing quite well and making the Boston Globe and the Portland Phoenix. And
like, what is quite well, and like define that in your words.
Financially,
Financially,
it was making money. It was in the black.
It was like how much in the black?
He would never really share how much, but by then I had a good enough idea.
Yeah.
But also not the healthiest environment either. There was still too much of that old corporate mentality going on. That.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I couldn't kind of grow out of, and I fed into as well. We both came from similar backgrounds. And I think we were both going at it,
right.
In that old school way.
I think one of the things we're starting to see in terms back to this idea of the evolution of the industry, you're starting to see that to attract onto yourself the chefs with your amount of talent, you can't just keep them on as like, it's getting harder and harder just to have them be a paid employee.
Yeah.
You know, like they're going to want stake in the business. Are you seeing that as a trend too? Do you see more of that today? Would you say?
A little more.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not 100% sure about the whole entrepreneurial sense in a lot of folks. You know, I think as they also know more about the business, they also know more about the business. And, you know, and that whole notion of, yeah, you know, restaurants are like printing money. Yeah, I think has been pretty well dispelled as well, you know, as people do understand. You know.
Right. Well, yeah. So wait, so the more you know about the business, the more you know about the business, meaning it's not the facade that we put up isn't the reality.
Yeah, it's not, you know, Food Network and celebrity chefs and
right.
know, far
Michelin
from
stars,
it.
beard. Yeah. That's one thing that like I think in terms of my own personal evolution as the host of Restaurant Unstoppable, when I started this podcast, I was looking at Michelin. I was chasing the Michelin guides, the James Beard Foundations, and the top, like, you know, any award outlet basically. I was like, these are the people that I'm going to go after. And then when I started talking to those people, and starting getting more confident about the numbers and the economics and getting more confident in asking these questions to learn more about the economics, I started to realize that these people that are supposedly the best, according to all these awards that are being granted out, are really struggling financially.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like, why are we continuing to spin up this model and encouraging more people to go down this path when that path isn't working for anybody?
And generally living pretty unhealthy lifestyles
Right.
because they're putting so much of themselves
Right.
into the business. They're not leaving anything else for the rest of their lives.
And that was one of the other things I was learning is the people that are the quote unquote best are also the quote, or not the quote unquote, the most unhealthy, whether it be emotionally or they have a mental illness. And the reason why they are the best is because they are sick.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
it is a pretty easy business to also go down the rabbit hole
And
as well.
yeah,
you know,
not
it does
to-
lend itself to that.
Right.
You know.
And not to discredit or to pull away from some of the things that have been achieved by some of these people. Like, it's an amazing achievement, but at the same time, should it be replicated? You know?
Yeah. And I get, you know, everybody, I guess, has to answer that for themselves. So
Right.
a bit like I know I was competitive coming up, right?
Yeah.
I know I had drive. Not everybody does that, and it doesn't mean they can't have happy and fulfilling lives doing this. That was just something in my brain that I needed to accomplish, or
Right.
I felt like. You know?
Right. I think we do it to ourselves though, because we kind of, to your point, our job as in the hospitality industry is to create an experience. We're projecting this facade of we have our shit together. This is like clean, organized, professional. We're literally transporting you. You're not supposed to know how hard we're working.
Oh, sure.
Right. And I think that image, we project that throughout the media, and then we draw people to that, and then they get into it and they're like, what, this is nothing like what I thought it would be, you know?
And the regular diners shouldn't need to know either. That's not part of their experience in
Right.
my eyes, right? That's not, you know, if they ask, okay, fine, you know, but
Right.
if they don't want to know, that's,
I respect that. But at the same time, when are we going to start being real with each other within
sure.
the industry?
yeah. Well, and that's the point and I think we are starting to be real with each
Right.
other, which is great. You know, again, that gets back to, you know, the health of your kitchen. You know, how happy is everybody in your restaurant? How involved, how invested, how proud are they to work there?
Right.
You know, do they work here because they enjoy it? And of course, yeah, you know, they're making the right amount of money, but they're not here because they hate it. But, oh man, I mean, the tips, I can't walk away, right? Or that kind of deal.
With the cash in
You
pocket
know,
at the
yeah.
end every
you
day.
know, but, you know, I personally don't want to be at the helm of that kind of an organization.
Right.
That has no interest for me. I want to be at the helm of an organization where people are proud to work at and feel good about it and enjoy the people they work with and around.
Exactly. And I think to kind of come full circle, so when I started with this podcast, I was chasing egos. I was chasing awards. And I started to realize that we have too much of this in the industry. I then started to focus on more fiscally responsible operations that have scaled. Then I said, well, we can't go too far in that direction because that's not good either. So now it's more about like, I've understood that success is relative, that there is no two paths that are exactly the same. And it's my job to share perspective from all the paths, whether you're a 5-star Michelin star operation or a 501c3, and helping people realize that it's not about the awards. It's about the community and the impact and the responsibility to your staff into making an impact. Like, that's what really matters. That if you are judging yourself based off of numbers, like how much money am I putting in the bank, you have a really long hill to climb. Because if you start focusing on how happy are you leaving your employees and your guests, and those metrics start to be the most important to you, then the rest kind of seems to take care of itself.
Yeah.
You might not ever be a millionaire, but you'll be happy.
Yeah. Well, John Tinius, one of the things I learned, certainly, corporate chef from him, he would say it over and over as a mantra, and it was always guest, team, restaurant in that order, every single time. Focus on the first two. Chances are that third one will take care of itself.
100%. Yeah. So, I am interested in the 100 Club. I want to talk about this time. And then you were at Demeter's Steakhouse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you found yourself. Then you made one more stop at the Algonquin, the Nikanos.
Yeah, Nikanos.
Yeah. Thank you. So we got a lot to unpack. This is why I wanted to have a whole separate episode dedicated to Mark Segal.
Yeah, few restaurants.
Yeah,
few restaurants, few different styles.
I knew we had a lot to talk about, and I didn't want to make John sit through all of that.
Pesce was all Italian seafood.
I think what you're doing here too with Folded, it deserves its own story as well.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah. So, okay, so 100 Club. This concept kind of seemed ahead of its time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
What was the 100 Club?
Private dining club, still there in downtown Portsmouth. So right as that area, corner of Market Street, as I like to call the 5 Points, right by the parking garage. But members only, and truly much more of a city club concept rather than country club.
Yeah.
Right.
What does a city club look like?
It's
I can't afford a membership.
No golf courses, no tennis courts, no gyms. That's not what that kind of club experience is about.
What was it?
It's about networking, social events, dining. Purely.
Is it just? Is it like a?
And then meeting space as well.
Does it look like a? So there's boardrooms.
Yeah, there's private meeting rooms.
Dining room, bar.
2 different dining rooms. One more casual, one more fine. We had a wine vault, which you didn't find in Portsmouth back then too often.
Was there like pool tables or
nothing? And again, no card table, no pool table.
Okay. See, I've always thought it'd be really cool to do a club like that for the same purpose, where there's like a barber shop.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
A pool table, a place to like really just like be and not necessarily have to order food. Just get a cocktail, your hair done, be around other people to mastermind, to network. I'm sure, but
there is, and I can't remember the name, but there is a private club in Portsmouth
like that.
That is like that, where you've got your own liquor locker.
Oh, cool.
That kind of deal, and you can just go up. Yeah, there's pool tables. I've never been up. I've only heard the lore.
Lucky enough,
exactly. Yeah, only heard the lore. But 100 Club was. That was where I probably had the most creative freedom.
Okay.
Anywhere that I cooked.
So what was that like? And I'll keep talking. I'm just gonna grab some.
Yeah, sure. Hopi Stradling, Neil Gibb, thank you. The owners of it, 2 very different guys that had a great partnership, that played to both their strengths. Some partnerships where you get folks that are, a little bit of come from opposite perspectives, and it can be, just constant back and forth and everybody stuck in the middle. And these guys were incredibly good about harnessing their differences and turning it into a positive. Like it was, that was a treat to work with.
Sorry for the mess I made over.
No, you're good. And I was actually told to increase my food cost within the first couple of months, which no chef ever really hears. But.
I don't think you got into the business model, but it was membership based.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. The reason why I think this was ahead of its time is because I think this is one of the business models that we all should look at more closely as a viable option versus the traditional 1905 business model.
Yeah, you have to have the right market for that, certainly.
Sure.
And downtown Portsmouth and the surrounding area, there was room for a private club at the time.
But I do think that there's like different vehicles to use a membership and maybe have it be like deliverables. Like, hey, like you're like you love our menu. Well, we can send you lunch every day.
Oh, sure.
Like there's technology and resources where we can take that membership model and bring it down to a price point that's more reasonable for people and also super convenient.
Yeah.
Right. So there's but that model of membership specifically is what I'm talking about.
Well, and I think we see that, in a lot of, the loyalty programs,
Yep.
That restaurants have, that that is that, I mean, we're public,
Right.
so anybody can walk in the door here. The club literally was private.
Right.
You are not allowed upstairs unless you're a member or with a member.
Yeah.
Period.
And
So
in terms of the profitability, I mean, you just know exactly how much money you have to work with. At the end of the day, unless a bunch of people kill their memberships, but I'm assuming it was an annual membership.
yeah, annual membership. Yep.
So you have like this constant flow of cash, like that, and this budget to it just must make the job a lot easier in terms of
There's definitely a predictability,
Right.
to that, and establishing, but then you've got your square footage, your space, right? So with membership comes expectation of access to that space.
right.
Managing
those
being
egos.
being able to get a table at Friday night at 7:00 when you've called it 4:00 that afternoon. So you want to keep the right size membership base so that it doesn't detract from the member experience, right? So, that comes down to a little bit of square footage, which is why I think the club just expanded a few years back.
Okay.
Because, and that's understandable at that level. If you're paying X number of dollars per year, for an access to a space, you expect access to the space.
Yeah. I think the other thing I like about that model, the membership model too, is you get a much better relationship with the guest.
Huge relationship with the guest. To me, that was, I knew members' names. I knew even if a server forgot that this particular individual does no salt, oh, no, that's Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so.
Right. You have a lot of consistency. The same people
yeah.
coming back and back. Typically when they're coming. No, or yes,
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, some people will, because we still have our snowbirds up here. So some people would just, head down to Florida for the season, that kind of stuff.
Were you leveraging a CRM at this time, like a customer relationship management tool to track those preferences, or was it just all in your head?
No, I mean, we were doing it a little bit on
Yeah.
the back end. Things weren't as sophisticated to be able to track that kind of information as they are now. It's a lot easier to do these days with the POS systems that are out. So,
Yeah.
but, we had and still does, they have a full-time concierge, and that was certainly remembering everybody's birthdays
Yeah.
and anniversaries and various
I'd like
things
that
was,
job. I think I would have to use a tool to remember the birthdays, though.
Yeah, and you had to, it was still a bit analog,
Yeah.
Back then. Everything wasn't necessarily
thick notebook.
digitized. So, but the relationships without question, were the strongest part of that. And for me, I felt the trust of the members as well. I didn't get that creative freedom when I first came on board, and you have to build that level of trust. So.
You said this delegations where you really started to form that skill during this time.
Yeah.
Has that continued to improve, or
and continues to improve, hopefully on and on and on.
Right.
That's still an area, where I try to think about my own actions a lot, between that and communication, for me, are the two biggest ones that I try to, if I'm looking at any of my behavior at this point, it's usually in that regard. Thank goodness I've been able to, was I a what today is hopefully not part of the thing I have to think about anymore.
Where was your delegation at this point? What were you what was that did that evolution of delegation look like at this point in your career?
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's be profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Combination of having people around me that I had worked with by then for a while. I was fortunate enough to have my old sous chef from Péché Bleu, not immediately, but as soon as he could transition up to the club. One of my leads in the kitchen did come with me right away. So having people that I knew, I could rely on and trust, and then teaching myself that it is okay to let go. Right. It's still, everyone went, okay, you're going to run this. Okay, don't mess it up. Don't mess it up.
But also building your people up to the point where they can be trusted to delegate too. Like, I think there's that reality of like, you can't just trust somebody without any experience until you build them up, until you've given them the skills.
Yeah. I had a dishwasher with me for a couple of years that, he kept wanting to come out of the dish room.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'd come back in the dish room and go, well, where's your backup soap? Why is this counter dirty? This is unorganized.
Yeah, show me you can do this.
When you can do this with plates and glassware, then you can start to touch food. And that very old school mentality that I still kind of haven't gotten rid of.
There's some truth to that, though. Yeah. Like, show me you can earn the next step.
Yeah.
And I think that's like one thing we've learned with this idea of building paths of growth for people. Like, hey, you want to be the GM of your own location someday? Here's what you have to do to get there. And here are the resources and the materials and the curriculum that we have laid out for you to get to these different milestones.
Yeah.
It's up to you to do the work, right? To show us that you are capable. So I think it's good to have you got to prove yourself before you.
And there are certain things you don't get to go around in this business, and certainly cleanliness and organization.
You think to the French Laundry,
top of the pyramid.
Right?
So
no matter who you are at the French Laundry, you start running food.
Yeah.
You start at the bottom and you work your way up.
Yeah. I think everyone who works in the kitchen should wait tables.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Is that something you do here?
Not only because we can, let's put it that way. We do have a team that's capable of doing that, and we will work that way when we need to.
Yeah.
We're still growing.
Have you ever been to the Oak House?
So, nope.
Do you know what I'm talking about? The Oak House in Newfields?
No.
They have a really cool model where they literally rotate their staff. It's a full service restaurant. So it's not like counter service or anything like that. It's a full service restaurant, and they rotate their front of house and their back of house staff through the dining room. And that way, it's great because it takes care of the pay disparity between front of house and back of house, the difference is there. Also, if you have somebody who calls in sick, you can call an audible and you can plug people into different roles and get by easier.
Yeah. That's a talented team, though. I mean, it's not easy. You don't find that sort of versatility everywhere, and it can certainly be trained, but.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is the versatility. There are people that are meant to be in the front of house, and there are people who are meant to be in the back of house. They do not deal well with people or whatever that is, or
it could be comfort level, all kinds of that. And again, those are things that can potentially be trained.
Right.
And
desire.
The more the more comfortable you get. But desire.
Right.
It has to start with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one of my mantras is, and I can always teach a good person how to be a good cook, but I'm powerless to do it the other way around.
Right. If you can pull it off, more power to you. But to your point, it's definitely not easy to do that.
If you start off with a bad attitude, I can't fix that. I can't do much.
Any other evolution lessons, perspectives at the 100 Club worth bringing to the table before we move on to your next role at Demeter's?
No, I mean, again, just much more of that, I'll go back to Justin Williams was my sous chef's name. He deserves to be mentioned by name.
Nice.
I was still carrying some of that attitude with me, the ego, the too controlling within the first couple of years. And I remember just saying something outrageous, so over the top.
What was it?
I believe it was something to the effect of, well, I may not be something or other, but I am, the Lord God in this kitchen. Like, oh, really, dude? And I remember him looking at me and just stopping and going, really? And by now we were really good friends. And I was like, oh, I did just, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll shut up now, kind of deal.
That's funny.
Yeah, but that if I had to look back to one moment, when Justin just literally
Little
didn't even need to say much,
ego check.
By that, just like
I love that. So, I mean, eventually you open your own business. You're the chef owner of Gravy LLC, but I think, I'm assuming there was probably some evolution for the Tinius hospitality.
Yeah, very much
during
so.
that time. It was a big chunk of your career.
Yeah.
But do we skip over what happened with Nakano? I'm so bad at these names, dude. I'm sorry.
Oh, Mykonos?
Mykonos, thank you.
Well, and again,
Demeter's?
part of the evolution of the career. Demeter's was pretty short-lived, in all honesty. I wasn't there quite a year. Enjoyed doing it. But by then, the 100 Club was already a steakhouse, and I'd been there, and that's primarily what we wound up becoming. That sort of model worked well for the membership and how they wanted to use it, because we utilized that classic steakhouse model of one part of the menu is all composed and that changes seasonally with specials, and then the other part of it is essentially that classic steakhouse menu that remains. Sides. Here's your cream spinach. Yep. Here's your super garlicky mashed potatoes.
I love me some garlicky mashed
but when you do
potatoes,
those right, exactly, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Exactly. I could be super proud of doing that as much as I could be proud of the veal sprite breads and lobster vol au vent that I had on the other side of the menu, you know. But like I said, that just turned out to be, for the membership, a good menu formula.
Got it.
Something that, if they wanted to come out and enjoy a special occasion and have something different, there was one side of the menu. If they were just looking to have a quick business meeting,
Were people smoking cigars in this place?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Maybe my goal is to be a member of the 100 Club.
Yeah, and outside. And cigars outside. Originally inside, but
well, even with a private club, it does
that went away. But the nature of cigars can be pervasive.
Fair.
So you need the right ventilation systems, I think, to do that right.
For sure. Okay, so what's the next stop on the journey? What do you want to talk about? Was there a point of evolution between leaving the 100 Club and joining Tinius, or should we just get straight into that?
I think straight into it.
Okay, so when did you join Tinius Hospitality?
That would have been, trying to think the way the years have gone by now. 2012, yeah.
2012, and you were there 13, until 22?
Until 18.
18.
Yep.
So still 6 years.
Yeah.
That's the longest tenure you've had anywhere else up to this point.
Yeah, other than the 100 Club, yeah.
Yeah. And it was your first time you oversaw the galley hatch? How many different there were other chefs with the hospitality.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
So
what were you responsible
the two different popovers locations, Grill 28 and the galley hatch.
That was all
all would have fallen under my oversight.
Okay.
And there was another huge level of growth for me in
first time mentioned multiple.
And learning to empower people that were really good and didn't need my help. They didn't need me to tell them how to do anything. I was still so used to doing that. That was still my style of leadership, even after almost a decade at the 100 Club.
Where were you with that skill set coming in, and where were you going out? How did that level of delegation go to the next level?
I think pretty horrible coming in.
Okay.
I came in, again thinking, I could be the guy to help them find the answers. No, they were the ones with the answers. I needed to ask the right questions.
How did that change? Take me through that. What does that look like today when you're finding somebody who you're working with and you're helping them get to the answers? How do you lead them to the answers?
Well, asking questions that are open-ended, asking questions that let them do the talking. not trying to make assumptions or get ahead of them. And this has been great training for me being here. I was actually able to sit down on a training session for motivational interviewing. That's much more about, addressing people in recovery or going through recovery, but allowing them to be the one to lead the conversation and supply you with the answers.
Right.
You're not the one who's coming up with the answers.
Well, to me, it's just like one of those 7 habits of highly effective people. First, seek to understand.
Yeah.
And you're never really seeking to be understood, but you're helping people teaching people how to ask the right questions to themselves.
Yeah.
Like taking them through the problem, like, well, let's start big picture and narrow it down, ask the questions, understand.
So for me, and that's where John and Steve, the 2 owners, partners in Popovers, we're both incredibly helpful and great mentors.
How do they teach you that?
A lot of time, frankly, a lot of conversations. Sometimes conversations where, I'd frustrate them to no end because I still didn't get it.
What didn't you get?
That it isn't, I am not the one with the answers. I heard them say it and it made sense to me, but then I'd still go back and behave the same way. I still tried to be the one solving the problem instead of helping them solve the problem, asking, what do you need? Being their facilitator, being their champion.
So not running it up the ladder, but making it stop at your rung, or trying to make it stop at your rung.
Yeah.
Got you. When did you finally get over that habit? What did it take for you to see?
I don't know if I'm ever over that habit. Yeah.
I appreciate the honesty.
It's still something where I know I've tripped myself up on.
Yeah.
For a long time. Old habits die hard kind of thing, right?
Right.
But trying to be conscious of it all the time.
Right.
And just that inner awareness, hopefully helps.
I
Hopefully
appreciate
it
the
mitigates,
And I really do appreciate the vulnerability. It's not easy. I ask tough questions in this podcast.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And I force people to get vulnerable, so I appreciate you.
It's a really good question.
So, anything different about this time? Also, I would say during this time, what was it, 2012 to 2018, we said?
Yeah.
I think the industry is also transforming a lot during this time.
Oh, yeah.
And what, from your perspective, how did it transform?
I think we were starting to see the beginning of that truly empowering individuals, creating a really healthy workplace and making that the focus and not having the bottom line numbers always be the focus.
Right.
I think that was really starting to have an impact across the industry.
Right. I think we went from drilling down, and success really became about managing that bottom line. And then we got too far in that direction to the point where we were just repelling people.
It lost its soul.
Yeah.
And this is a business of people. Of course we're in it, for our guests, and ultimately it is about that sense of hospitality, but it is about that sense of team.
Right.
As well. It is a tough business, and like anything that you go through that's difficult, you get very close to the individuals that you go through it with.
Right. So was it John Tenius that was saying guest, team, community?
And then restaurant business.
Guest, team, business.
But,
got it. Yeah. Was that something that was said from 2012 to 2018, or was this something new that started coming up? This idea of like taking care of the team over the restaurant.
I don't think enough people were saying it at the time. Okay. Certainly, I'm sure there were, but it just wasn't out there enough.
Got it.
And I think, he's a good example of how that's really spread throughout the industry and growing more and more.
You got to look at what the Galley Hatch is. It's a staple in the New Hampshire seacoast. It's been around. I remember being probably 12 years old, going to the Hampton Theater and seeing the ads for the Galley Hatch next door. And I'm sure it was around from, that was like the 90s, and they were around in the 80s and 70s, weren't they?
Yeah, over 45 years now.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah, and it's that family legacy though, and you start to, and it is that sort of legacy business where, there's something special about when a guest comes into the Hatch and their parents have gone there.
Right.
And now they go there, and now they're bringing their kids there.
It's
Yeah, that's magic. That's
Yeah.
that's where that you asked her like, where's the magic? And
Well,
that's
tapping
one
into-
of the areas
yeah.
where it's magic.
If you can tap into generational ritual, like family ritual, family history, and like make that generational, that's if you can achieve that. Although I wonder where they're going to be in 10 years when 50% of their clientele isn't around anymore.
He changes all the time.
Yeah, does
yeah.
it?
Oh yeah,
That's good.
Deliberately. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he has it set in his mind that every 10 years I will
Refresh.
do a major overhaul. There are minor things that happen in between those 10-year periods, but oh no, he's well. That's, I mean, I learned so much from him.
Yeah.
For, like, incredibly humble. Like, super knowledgeable.
To have Jeff Benjamin on the show. I don't know if you know that name from Vetri Restaurants.
No.
You've heard of Vetri?
No.
In
Oh,
Philadelphia?
sure. Yeah.
So he was the front of house. He was like the partner of Vetri.
Okay.
He was
Oh,
more
no,
like the
no.
operations. And they work it into their budget every 5 years. They put money aside to have a major like a refresh because you have to reinvent yourself because you have to stay relevant. You have to juxtapose against yourself because if you get stale, people are going to find a new shiny object. So you have to constantly be changing the core or something, staying fresh. It's not easy to do, to reinvent yourself like that.
And
So he does
especially when you've already got a great track record of success.
Right.
That's what really impressed me the most about John was how
Yeah.
much he pushed himself, and obviously still does push himself,
Right.
but to constantly still be learning and growing on his own, knowing that, and it is the old, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backward kind of thing.
Yeah.
But,
I just met my editor there the other day in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Sunday, and the place was like, good luck finding a place just to pull over to hand off an external hard drive to my editor. It's amazing. Do they do like a crazy brunch there every day, or is that like a special event?
And it's just that busy generally all the time, but again, there was a great example of like, this is a legacy business. I was brought on to be their corporate chef, and I came into it with the wrong attitude, looking to be the person with the answers, and I should have asked so many more questions.
Mm-hmm. What else did you learn? You said you learned so much from John. What else did you learn?
Well, I mean, certainly, the level that you invest in individuals, accountability as well, with being the facilitator, also, comes allowing them to have that accountability, letting people, not letting them fail, but letting them have their struggles,
Yeah.
letting them work through it, having enough trust to go, okay, I see you squirming now, but I know you're going to find the other side. you
Yeah.
know?
Not micromanage, not hover, but
Yeah.
like be aware, let them figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Which is difficult. I mean, to me, that's so important. I learned so many other tiny things, whether it just, little staffing subtleties and, scheduling for core.
Well, you said that was a challenge for you early on, scheduling. How did your scheduling game improve?
I got a lot more efficient about it.
How?
So, learning how to adjust for peak times, really going back through history. That's another nice thing about a legacy business is by then they've got a lot of data behind it. So their ability to really be able to predict,
Were they using software to help with that?
Actually, no, just an individual and
Wow.
yeah,
Tracking all that.
lot of spreadsheet
They're
crunching.
not just twiddling their thumbs upstairs.
Lot of spreadsheet. Oh, not at all. Oh, no, far from it.
Yeah. I mean, they're a company that's been on my radar. Honestly, I would love to learn more. I know it's hard to get time with John. I would love to make that interview happen. I'm sure there's a story to be told there. When you came out of that organization, how were they different? If they made that, you said there was that evolution, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, in terms of like anything I did in particular that they were any different with. I don't think they were, I guess, and again, that goes back to like, they didn't need me for the answers, I think part of the reason I came on as corporate chef, is I had that background in fine dining and a lot of farm to table stuff.
Right.
And John was definitely interested in doing that.
Was that what Tino's was going to be about?
And yeah, very much. Well, Tino's, was definitely, designed to be a fine dining restaurant. Right.
And that was you were the opening chef for
Yeah.
that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and helped John come up with the concept. And he actually wasn't thinking Greek. He kind of was, but again, to give you a good sense of his humility, he never said a word to me about it, and just presented the space.
It's a beautiful space.
And went, okay, what would you do with this? I'm thinking maybe, he threw a couple of things against the wall. I'm thinking maybe sushi, high-end Italian. I chewed on it for a little while and came back to him and went, what about Greek, John? You're Greek. You come from a proud Greek restaurant tradition. You've got multiple restaurants, but you don't have a Greek restaurant. And Greek food right now is actually on the rise. And it was at that time when Greek food was really experiencing a renaissance. And he just got this quiet little smile. He'd already, but he knew he needed to hear it from other people. And it's not like once I said it, he went, oh, okay, I guess that's what we're doing.
Look for validation.
But also smart enough to, and not even necessarily validation, but humble enough to go, all right, let me make sure I'm not the only one in the room here.
Yeah. Those leadership skills that you can't really, the intuitive to like make it a we, not me.
Yeah. Very much so. And then it turned into, Tinos, which is the island that his family's from in Greece. We got to work with the gentleman out of New York at a Molivos restaurant, Kamal Curry, who runs their wine program there. Probably one of the most, if not the most, authority in the States on Greek wines. So we went through the process of setting up an all Greek wine list that was like 80 bottles deep in New Hampshire when you could only get like really bad Mavrodaphne and stuff like that. So
I think we went there for either my dad or my mother's birthday, and we had a really great experience. I think it was while you were still a chef there. I want to say it was 2009 or 18.
And the rest of the team in the kitchen is still there. So Chef GJ and Josh, again, super talented peeps.
So I'm hearing words you've mentioned, like looking back, like I could have done this better, I could have done that better. They were right in this, they were right in that, I was wrong. How did it end? Like, did you quit? Were you asked to leave?
No, I was asked to leave.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What did that feel like? Take me to that point.
It's a big ego blow. Still, I'd only been asked to leave one other place in my entire career, and that was back in Campanile days. I actually wasn't in that kitchen very long before I went on to the Buffalo Club over there. And Mark Peel and I just never got on well. Mm-hmm. No issues with Nancy. We were going to farmers markets together. Mark got it in his head. I was a little CIA punk, even though, what time you need me here, boss? Right. But, I don't know. But so that really didn't last, all that long at all. But there was a lot of time in between there and then, but I needed that.
You got to drive well with the people you're working with.
As well. Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't work. Conflict of personality or whatever. Different visions, different objectives. Can't get it on the same page. Like, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but
I was still just too headstrong. Yeah. Honestly. Yeah. I still wasn't listening enough. Gotcha.
Well,
and again, retrospect is everything. I had wonderful mentorship there that, I kind of used, but I didn't utilize enough. So some of the important lessons still weren't sticking.
So where were you in that time, being let go, asked to leave? Did you have a plan? Did you get what was next for you? This is a hard time for you, I'm assuming.
Yeah, sure. But I had already developed the gravy concept in my head. So, I had it in the back of my head that, okay, I'll develop this out in my brain a little bit more, and then hopefully have it be something, that might come under the fold of Tinius Hospitality,
right.
Just be another division of,
right. So what was the vision for gravy?
And basically, simple, fast casual, was a concept that I was looking for in my head. I didn't know quite what that would look like. I knew I wanted my own restaurant.
Yeah.
Right. But I knew I didn't want it to be about me, even with all my years of fine dining. To me, if it was doing that, it was feeding too much back into the habits that I was trying to break, with the ego and the controlling and all that kind of stuff.
So you felt like you had to get away from fine dining to break the habits?
Yeah, at least that part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, if it was about everybody else and not me, then that would help that
right.
a lot. If I'm the one who's still driving the menu and seasonal changes, all
Right.
that kind of stuff. There's still too much of that.
Well, you're also
going on.
seeing evolution in yourself and recognizing that fast casual has higher, potential earning with lower potential lift.
That was also a big part of the equation. Yeah, I wanted something replicable.
So what was the food? What was the food? Like, what was the vision for the food, and how is it fast casual?
So, and it wound up being the largest version. The version I came out with was sort of the largest scalable version of gravy that I had ever envisioned. It just worked out with the space I took.
That was in Dover?
Yeah, actually here in Somersworth.
Oh, Somersworth. Okay.
Yeah. But it was I had the idea for gravy in the sense that it could be scaled up or scaled down menu size. And it's a build your own menu. You pick a gravy, pick a protein and or starch, and a bunch of toppings, and you can literally just create your own little dish.
Okay.
And then some
So-
sandwiches and burgers and hot dogs to supplement. And because I had the giant toppings list, that also means I've got a giant toppings list to do anything you want with a burger or a hot dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were the different gravies?
So started off with a white gravy, bechamel, essentially, that would then become the base for tasso gravy. And the whole concept behind gravy was that homey comfort food. So no matter what your nationality was, no matter where you grew up in the country, there was some sort of gravy on your table.
Right.
Right. If you're from an Italian family in Boston, we'd know it as red sauce, but they're saying
Right.
pass the gravy, right?
Yeah. I heard that was just a lost in translation. Like when the Italian immigrants came to Boston, they didn't have a word for tomato sauce in American, so they just called it gravy.
So
Yeah.
As long as I'm getting what I want, that works. Oh, okay. That word works to get me what I'm looking for. Cool. I guess pass the gravy.
Yeah.
Give me the gravy. Great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, that's cool.
But so that was the idea of it. So the sense that it was something nostalgic, something relatable and comfortable for people.
So was it like an assembly line, like where you would meet somebody kind of like at a Chipotle, and like you have a bowl, like pick your gravy, pick your protein, and then you just kind of like add ingredients as you go? Did you have like prefixed options?
Both of which, yeah.
Okay.
So one side was entirely build your own, and then the other side was just, kind of suggestions, if
Let
you
us
will,
build it
from
for
the
you.
other side. Yeah. And throwing names at it.
I usually go that route myself.
Yeah. One of my old favorite sayings too is, amateurs imitate, but professionals steal.
Yeah.
So, I remember always being enamored with the business model of the meatball shop.
Oh yeah.
Down in New York City, right?
I had them on the
this
show.
Very clear vision, but they have those menu checklists at the table. Right? Pick
Yeah.
what style of meatball you want, pick what kind of sauce you want. So I had the same thing going on with gravy.
love that.
And all designed to be counter service.
And this is the first restaurant you had ever owned from the beginning.
Correct.
And built out from the beginning.
Yep.
What were the challenges associated with that for you?
Starting it with $15,000 to start.
Okay. Well, that's not easy. I mean, Somersworth at the time, 2018 is when you started this. Was
Yeah.
it immediate? I feel like this was a really great market to be in at that time because it's a momentum market. You probably didn't. I think this whole area post pandemic has probably gone a rush of new people. I know a lot of people sold their homes closer to the Mass border and came up here and kind of got a lot more for less.
And we're seeing the push from the Portsmouth market because the Portsmouth market's gotten so pricey.
It happened to Dover 10 years ago, and now it's happening to Somersworth and Rochester.
Somersworth, right? Exactly.
Yep.
Yep. So this whole corridor is experiencing tremendous growth because of that.
If you can hang on, I think there's a lot of opportunity here because it's just coming.
Oh,
already
yeah.
here. Yeah.
No, and we already made it through our first year. And we're still growing.
Yep.
Knock wood. All those numbers are still lining up in the right way.
I think it's in those fringe. We started talking about this earlier, but I think it's in those fringe markets and looking at macroeconomic trends. Where are people moving? Where is the money going? And I think right now there's this huge rush from Massachusetts. People are getting out of Massachusetts and they're taking their money into New Hampshire. More and more people don't depend on cities for their income anymore. People are working remotely.
Oh, sure.
They want to get out of the city. There's more freedom outside the city. They can get away. Like the cost of being in the city is just getting so outrageous. Like why spend $1.5 million for a 3-bedroom house to be close to the center of Boston.
Yeah.
Like when you could come to the New Hampshire and for that amount of money get 10 acres of land,
great quality of life,
Right.
great school systems,
Right.
all those things. So, yeah.
So, so back to 2018, you had $15,000 to open. Is that the money?
Yeah,
you
and it
had
was
in-
2020 now as we're talking. So,
2020.
I opened Gravy February of 2020.
January. Wow. And you didn't have. You couldn't.
And
get
by then,
any-
the leases were already signed. I'd signed the lease back in October before anybody was talking about anything. So,
where was the location? Tell me about where you found a location and why this location felt right to you.
actually, so here in downtown Somersworth on Main Street, it's the site of the old rail station in town.
That's cool.
So this gorgeous late 1800s building built by a French architect, 20-foot high ceilings, huge fireplace, and the building itself is 2 stories. So the ground level where I was would have been the lobby for the train station. And then there were areas where you'd go downstairs, down below to the platform.
Okay.
And then there's another restaurant space underneath that. But then the nostalgia of the space really spoke to me. The history in it, to me spoke a lot about, the whole nature of Gravy and that comfort level, that hominess. Entry level wasn't bad either.
What about the rent?
I was going to say entry level wasn't bad. Could have been better. I again, hindsight 2020. Could have negotiated that a little harder.
So, I mean, there's a lot of skills. I mean, there's one thing, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way. I try to talk to business owners because this is a business podcast, and I love talking to chefs to learn about the evolution of leadership. We got that from you today. I think that's huge because you are leaders. But there's the side of like the entrepreneurial side of the business.
Very much so.
Yeah, the numbers and the marketplaces and the branding and the market, like so much is a whole nother. That's why the chef restaurateur combinations do so well, because you need to be amazing in both of those verticals.
Yep.
And I tend to like to talk about the entrepreneur side of things. So was there a challenge for you in that front? The entrepreneur
Hugely,
side of things?
yeah, and probably more so than anything else. I mean, I wound up closing the doors on Gravy in Wells, Maine. I wound up moving it during the course of that 4 years.
I saw that.
From Somersworth to Wells to Route 1, thinking I'm going to drive more traffic.
Is that where Lee Franks is now?
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's where Lee's location is now.
Okay. I actually recorded my interview with Lee in that location.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and I
not
I
cool
hope
that
it
it's no
works.
longer a Gravy.
No, I love Lee to death.
Oh, he's
tremendous respect.
amazing.
I hope he
Yeah.
has 10 times the success that I saw there. That's for sure.
So hindsight being 2020, if you could have done anything, knowing what you know now about the entrepreneurial side of things, would you have done anything different?
Oh yeah.
Like what?
Yeah. First things first, I should have changed or adapted, maybe not just necessarily the name Gravy. I was getting a lot of feedback about people. Well, I don't really like gravy. Well, gravy's a little heavy. And to me, it's like, well, it's a name. It's just, like you call a restaurant Fat Tomatoes. It doesn't, so, but I didn't listen enough to that, right? So I think I alienated, a chunk of clientele that probably could have enjoyed themselves quite well. I made a delicious vegan mushroom gravy.
Right. I'm not gonna lie, just I didn't know that you were a bowl concept. I'll be honest. I assumed it was more heavy.
Yeah, and I get it, right? So yeah, I think doing something in our brand identity that explained that a lot better to people.
So the
and the
branding
complication,
side of things?
well, and also the menu structure, as well. There are so many people that do substitute on menus these days, and I'm fine with it to the point where I was like, great, I'm going to give you your own menu. You can literally pick and choose anything you want on here. Yeah, for the right individual, they love that. For other individuals, it's too confusing. Now I'm overwhelmed. I'm intimidated.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And, nobody needs that for a dining experience. So, I could have presented that
Just how you
in
deliver
a
it.
better way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about any other like big? This is a whole new world for you, right? So I'm assuming it was like filled with learning opportunities.
Oh gosh, yeah. And especially during that time period. I did wind up going to school for accounting.
Okay.
So I was doing my own books. Comfortable with doing it. In a rudimentary format.
Was that after you left Tinius? To go to school for accounting, or was this?
No, this was I had done that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, even before that. So I had a little bit of a just enough to be dangerous. Kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
But I can keep a journal and and write a basic P&L and stuff like that. So for a little restaurant for me, it worked.
Yeah.
It also took a lot of time. A lot of time I could have been spending maybe a little more focused on the branding, on the messaging, on the marketing.
Yeah.
All right?
Well, I'm curious because you were able to open a restaurant, so you couldn't have done it with $15,000. Did you?
Yeah.
Was it just
Yeah.
because of your network? Were you able to source the hardware and everything you needed?
Yep. So combination, the kitchen space came with some
So it's
equipment,
turnkey.
terrible equipment,
Yeah.
but okay, it turns on, it works.
Yeah.
We can figure this out.
Yeah.
Definitely had the support of some other restaurant individuals in the area that didn't provide backing, but provide every other level of support that I could have asked for, like turning over a giant warehouse storage space full of restaurant stuff and went, take whatever you need.
Well, I mean, I think it's really important to point out that you were on the board for Chefs Collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
Like how amazing do you want to address them, or are you good?
It's okay.
I think they figured it out.
Yeah, he knows we're not open.
Okay,
So
yeah.
he's one of our regulars. That's
Got
Steve.
So, I mean, but having that network, being so connected across the nation, I'm sure there was just an outpouring of people to support you.
A tremendous amount of support.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and you could feel it. And it was great. I mean, I got to experience a glorious 3 weeks when, pre-COVID, everybody's just still out dining and doing their things. And yeah, it was encouraging because I knew I had to come out. I made the first critical mistake that you should never do in the restaurant business. And I came out totally undercapitalized.
Yes.
Like ridiculously
And like
undercapitalized.
it's honestly one of the reasons why I get so awkward with people in some of the conversations, and I ask them questions that you shouldn't ask somebody in business. But in full transparency, I was inspired by podcasts like Mixergy, where the host literally starts every episode. And I've been thinking about doing this, asking like, what is your gross today? How much money did you make this year? And he doesn't make people answer, but he asks the question, and he's never a dick if they're like, no, I can't say for whatever reasons. He's like, oh, okay. But like, just ask, and if some people are willing to talk about that stuff, then great. Let's get into the numbers, and I think that we in the industry could be much better about being transparent at that level of like, listen, like if you're doing 5 to 10%, you're doing better than 90% of the people in the industry.
And some of the best lessons are learned through failure. So,
Right.
I don't mind talking about my gravy experiences at all, as painful as that 4 years was in a lot of ways.
But it all starts with being undercapitalized. If you don't have, at least 6 months, 1 year is better. 2 years is ideal of just operating costs to operate in the red and cover all of your liabilities, because it takes time to 1, build regulars, 2, figure out what you need to do to adapt. Like if you had that runway, like what pivots could you have made with gravy?
Well, that's a hard one for me to answer, I guess, only in the sense that the timing of the restaurant was so terrible. Right.
That's true.
Opening in February of 2020. Right. My doors were open to the public for 3 weeks. We were only open at half capacity by the end of June of that year, but everybody was still in, just that finding their own way space. I had online ordering available because I was using the Toast POS platform, which I really loved. That was a big tool. That was super helpful. because again, it allowed me to be leaner on staff.
Yeah.
I was already running it with just me in the kitchen and a cashier.
How did Toast allow you to be leaner with staff?
Just through the automation on their online ordering system. So I could drive a lot of my takeout business.
So not having somebody on the phone.
Exactly. You know, so that definitely made things a lot more efficient.
For somebody who's been I think I hate to group you in the older generation of restaurant operators, but coming up in the majority of your career and not having that level of technology, online ordering, was there a hurdle for you, or did they make that easy?
They made it really easy.
Yeah.
But, by then I'd already been wrestling with a lot of the much more cumbersome programs, the old Alohas of the day and all that stuff that were, so the fact that this was already essentially an intuitive platform to work from, for restaurant people, built by restaurant people. I don't want to sound too much like an ad for them or anything, but I mean, it really was easy to do, to the point where I did my own IT setup. That was one of the things, because they can do it, but that also costs money.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any money, but I do have time.
They were
trailblazers.
They were trailblazers for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely a great platform. There's a reason why they're the most recommended on the show.
Yeah.
And I think part of being such a trailblazer, when the pandemic hit, they were really set up for success with the online ordering, and to be able to make that transition seamless for the restaurants was huge for them.
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic. It was invaluable, frankly, for at least help keeping gravy limping along, and did try, tried my own pivots. Like I did become a grocery store for a little while, partnered up with Dole and Bailey, out of Boston, out of Woburn, and became an outlet for ground beef and chicken and steaks when you couldn't find it in the grocery store, but I could, I wasn't driving any traffic there by then. I mean, the pandemic hit, the wall came down, and as things started to open up, they just never quite opened up for me, so I was always struggling right on the cusp or just below break even. But the eternal optimist that I am, I always thought, well, this next month is going to be my month. And
when did you know it was time to close the doors?
The end of last summer up in Wells. So the idea was, okay, let me see if I can move from the location that I'm at in Somersworth. Even though I love the building, there's very little traffic that drives by there, and almost no walking community.
Right.
So, my visibility was not good.
Right. If you were struggling at that point, at the end of the summer, would you have been able to make it through the winter in Wells?
And by then, but I mean, again, hindsight 2020, I had already had 2 years plus invested in Somersworth. I did think moving to Route 1 in Wells, especially on the heels of my experience with helping to open Mykonos and seeing that volume that happens in the summertime in the Ogunquit Wells area. Okay, I can get open in the summertime, in that time period, substantially increase my revenue, which never really happened. It did increase, but the overhead increases that came with it,
labor,
with the much larger, just the basics. First of all, just the overhead in the rent.
Okay. Increased
rent, significantly increased rent. Instead of the equipment coming with the building, it was a lease to own agreement. So an additional expenditure there.
Anything we should know about lease to own agreements? Like them, not like them, but was it just not right for you at the time?
No, it actually would have worked out fine. And that number was fair. I mean, you negotiate that to me, like you would any other lease, so you want to obviously,
they want it to work because they want to get their money back on the assets,
so, I mean, other than things like, that are certainly fixed to the building, if you're looking at a lease to own and they're talking about the hood, well, the hood's not going anywhere.
Right.
That's part of the building.
Got it.
Stuff like that.
So was all the equipment that was in there lease to own, or did you go to the supplier and do lease to own?
No, in the building. Yeah.
Okay,
so with the landlord, and the landlord is also the the owner of the equipment, all that stuff, and a great relationship, with the landlord there. Probably too good, to the point, they wanted me to succeed so well that as I was struggling to make my rent payments, well, we'll give you a little more time on rent.
Right.
Which was great, except
Further in the
I
hole.
could never, it's all it wound up being
Yeah.
at the end of the day. It was just that slow trickle, just enough, and I got as lean as I could. Even in Wells, I spent the first winter that I was there as my own dishwasher, my own cook, my own prep cook, sometimes also my own server and bartender. You can't get much leaner on labor than that. If you can't make your numbers work from that, then they just don't work.
Where were you emotionally? We're getting close to the end of the interview. Where were you emotionally when you decided to shut the doors?
Pretty beat up, actually. Yeah. I generally stay very positive. I've always kind of had that little bit in me, and I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. Again, hindsight, I knew I could tell already,
What were you
now
feeling?
having time to step away from it. Certainly feeling defeated, feeling concerned at my age, because it wasn't like, my restaurant failed when I was 35 and I've got
Right.
another, 20, 30 good years of earning ahead of me, very much that, I needed to make this work.
Yeah.
And still didn't. Still think about what I coulda, woulda, shoulda done, even as much as I also know I started a restaurant in February of 2020 on $15,000, and I almost made it work for a
Right.
full 4 years.
Right. That's something, man.
I did something there.
Yeah. You should be proud of that.
So, and I think so. I hope I have it in the good perspective. Taking the right lessons away from it. And not the wrong ones.
Well, I'm tempted to keep going on the conversation, but there was something that came only 2 months after closing for you, because you joined here in November 2023,
Yeah.
correct? So you closed in
Oh no,
August?
I joined here in March, so I needed a little time.
Okay.
I was not
I was
ready
gonna
to go anywhere.
So was this
in
on your
November.
radar when you, how did they find you?
Actually, through a mutual friend, restaurateur Emmett Soldati, who owns Teetotaler.
Okay.
So Emmett knew that, I had just closed up Gravy. Wasn't sure where I was at, but John was looking for a new chef here. And the role is chef and GM.
Yeah.
So it is it does take someone who does have that skill set as well.
And we are doing back-to-back interviews. So I am going to pause the conversation. John is going to be joining us shortly. We'll pick up where we left off during this transition of, we'll kind of pick up that train of thought of how you were feeling and how this came onto your radar. And I don't know if it is what is filling your cup today. I mean, you're doing meaningful work. We'll get more into that meaningful work. But before we wrap up this conversation, I got to ask you a few questions, my friend. What is one thing about your businesses or your current business today, a value, a process, a system that makes you truly unstoppable?
I would say really it is about our individuals. It is about, and when I say that, I don't mean like in terms of any other team. The recovery-friendly, incarceration-friendly aspect of it, the fact that we're not just here to do all the things you should and hopefully do really well in hospitality, but the investment in people's lives on a real personal level. Personal level.
That's
like
transformative power.
down, like going deep
Yeah.
on a personal level.
Yeah, I can't wait to get more into the work you guys are doing. That's a great teaser. And if you're listening to this, the next episode off the heels of this is going to be both Chef Mark and John Burns talking about the work they're doing with Folded. So that's a great teaser right there. If you got the news, the mission statement is to change the world by inspiring, empowering, and transforming the restaurant industry. So how have you personally transformed? Who are you today versus the man you were when you got started in this industry?
Well, the man I got started in this industry was definitely about themselves, about how much they could accomplish, certainly about how much I could push myself, learn, grow. But the man today is so far removed from that ego. I want to see others do well. I want to see other people get to enjoy the best parts of this business without carrying the baggage of some of the worst parts of this business that I took with me. So being a better mentor to them than I had coming up, trying to teach them different skill sets, different tools in the tool bag, so they don't have to feel as one-dimensional as I felt. Yeah.
So the last question. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of your legacy, or for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've covered a good amount of it, in our conversation, right? But that kindness and understanding, real empathy, for people.
1.
Yeah, humility.
2.
I think decency kind of falls into the same, all the same stuff. But at the same time, as much as I do want to see a kinder, more gentler business, drive, ambition.
Yeah, ambition.
I do like to see that fire. For people to feel like they can accomplish what they want to. Yeah.
I love that. This has been a lot of fun, Chef Mark. So I wrap up every chat by having my guest call somebody out. That's how I found you. I knew about you. We got the documented call out officially happened. We got you on the show. We're going to be getting you and John on the show shortly. Again, who do you respect and admire? Who is doing something truly special? It can be anywhere in the country, or it could be right here on the seacoast of New England. They are taking care of their staff. They are fiscally responsible. They're making money. They're doing good things. Who's that for you, or who are they for you?
There's so many, truly, right?
I know you're a wealth, man. You know people. So
yeah, but I think you've had quite a few of them on already, right? Dave Vargas, Evan Hennessy, Lee Frank, all those individuals.
I'd love to get Dave Vargas back on the show. Matt Lewis back on the show.
And they're, such influential, people. Greg Sessler from Cava, all that, But, at the same time, his name came up in conversation, like Emmett Soldati with Teetotaler, There's somebody who's incredibly bright, running a successful business, has had to pivot a few times, done so successfully, and also still managing to run for public office. I don't know where you get your energy and drive from, but I'd like a little bit of that, please.
How do you spell his last name?
Soldati.
Soldati, teetotaler.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Emmett, look out. I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. We mentioned some names. I would love to get Greg Sessler back on the show. I'd love to get Dave Vargas back on the show. I recently had Evan and Lee back on the show, so thank you for echoing those names.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's kind of what I've learned and how I've evolved over this podcast. It's not about how many people you know. It's about going back. It's about building relationships stronger and going deeper, and that's what I hope to do. Do
my decades allow me to?
Yeah, man. We're gonna come back in. Well, literally in an hour from now, we're gonna be hitting record again. But I'd love to be back in 5 years to share the evolution of what you're doing here with Folded. Maybe you're still here. Maybe you're
and I don't even mean with me. I mean another name.
What do you mean? Oh, more names?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
So Paul Cote with Fat Dog Kitchen.
Paul, how do you spell that last name?
Cote. He's the restaurant all the other cooks in the area eat at. There's
What's
like the Fat Dog Kitchen.
Where is that here
in Dover?
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah. All the chefs in New York City eat at Hearth.
Right.
It's like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, he's going to have some great call outs then. I'd love to make that happen. Paul, Emmett, look out. I'm coming after you. Dave Vargas, I would love to reconnect. Greg Sessler, I'd love to reconnect. Is Greg still where he was 10 years ago?
He's Oddfellows, so he has his own. Yeah, he and his wife have their own restaurant in Berwick, right in South Berwick.
Oddfellows, South Berwick.
The Oddfellows Tavern. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, some work cut out for me. I'm gonna have to head down there right after this.
There you go.
All right, Mark, we'll be back here in about an hour. Can't wait to pick up the story where we left off with John Burns. This is going to be good, and this is where I say there is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable.
Thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.